There is really no such thing as one size fits all financial planning. And so in today's video, I'm going to break it down by decade from your 20s to your 60s and beyond about what you need to be doing to be able to really solidify your wealth journey and be as successful as you can be in every single decade of your life. If you're new to my channel, hello and welcome. I'm Sarah Edens. I'm a financial consultant and I specialize in wealth psychology and financial education. So go ahead and subscribe right now before we get started because I put out weekly videos to help you be a success in your wealth journey. And to my current subscribers, it's so nice to have you in my community. Thank you so much for joining me again. It's great to see you. All right, so let's dive into what we need to do by decade to be able to be successful in our wealth journeys, starting with the 20s. And I have to say, I wish I'd had this list when I was in my 20s. This would have been hugely helpful, but better late than never. So the first thing to really focus on is what's the goal in your 20s? If I had to pin it down, I would say the goal is to build the foundation of your wealth. So you're looking at creating stability and really establishing your wealth identity. It's so much about our mindset when it comes to money. So really very early on, starting to think of yourself as a wealthy person before you ever see seven figures. And I have a whole video on that I will put up on screen and link to in the description if you want to watch that later as well. So the first thing to do in your 20s is really to start investing early. Every single financial planner out there will tell you this, that the sooner you start investing and taking advantage of something called compound interest, the better your rate of return will be over time, because it's not about timing the markets, it's about time in the markets. How long are you in the markets with your investments over time? And so it really is important to take advantage of that. Even $200 a month can really make a huge difference by the time you're 60. If you have figured that the stock markets in the US typically range anywhere between 6 to 8% rate of return. And this is not an investment advisory channel, so be sure to speak with an investment advisor about the right type of portfolio setup for your situation. But really key to start that investing as early on as possible if your goal is to lay that foundation. Second thing is to build your financial literacy and your habits. You're already doing that by watching this video, so congratulations, that's fantastic. And it really is important to start automating your savings. If you've started investing already, get those investments automated. Start learning about how to manage credit responsibly. Start understanding taxes and build your first budget. And it doesn't have to be like a PhD level understanding of any of the above, okay? This is where you're just getting started. So no one expects you to have all your financial anythings figured out in your 20s. If you have a budget in your 20s, everyone's going to be vastly impressed with you. So really, really important to just remember that you don't have to know everything right now. It's just about laying the foundation for the rest of your wealth journey in your 20s. And then you want to look at creating an emergency fund. Obviously, we're looking at 3 to 6 months of living expenses to cover things like bills, cover rent, cover car payments, cover health insurance premiums, all of this, so that if you end up in between jobs for a while, which just seems like it's becoming more and more common these days, or maybe you're furloughed and you have a gap in pay, that you're not at the mercy of payday loan sharks who are just trying to charge exorbitant interest to people who are in a jam. So really key to have that buffer for yourself. And then really in your 20s, and I think that personally, this is the thing that is absolutely critical, since we can't hit rewind on time and go back and have a do-over, which wouldn't that be nice? But since it's not an option, I'm going to tell you, if you're in your 20s, listen carefully. Really key to invest in yourself. Invest in yourself, invest in your skills, invest in your education. If you're interested in entrepreneurship, invest in your business skills and learning how to set up successful businesses. That can be just a wonderful opportunity for you as well. Or you can also pursue the corporate route, which can be a wonderful opportunity too, depending on how you do it. There's not any one right path when it comes to your career. It's just what's right for you. And so really key to remember that the 20s are the time to really double down on investing in yourself and in your skills. And this is particularly true about school. When I was in my 20s, I didn't fully appreciate how busy you get when you're in your 30s and 40s and beyond, and how many more responsibilities you have, whether you're married or you have a long-term partner, maybe you've got children. By the time people start getting into their 50s, they probably have aging parents they're caring for as well. They call it the sandwich generation. I see a lot of my colleagues on LinkedIn speaking about this, about people who get in that gap there, that space where you're sandwiched in between. You still have kids at home or kids who are in college who need your support, and then your aging parents suddenly need more support and care and nurturing from you as well. So it's that sandwich generation where you're caring for two different generations, one on one side and one on the other. And so I did not fully appreciate when I was in my 20s in particular how busy life gets and how many more responsibilities you have as you go along. And that's all part of growing up, which is great. But your 20s are really a great time to get that schooling knocked out. So if you're looking at getting graduate level education, let's say you've already finished a college degree or you're finishing that up and you're thinking about, should I do graduate school now? Should I do later? Do it now, because you will never have this much free time again in your life. I can almost guarantee it, give or take a few exceptions. Most people don't have as much flexible time in their lives ever again as they have in their 20s. And so when it's just you and you don't have a lot of obligations to family and a job and debt and mortgages and all of this, knock out your graduate stuff, knock out that MBA, knock out anything that you think you might want to achieve, and don't put it off, because it's possible to go back to school later as an adult learner and do graduate level work, which is actually what I'm getting ready to do starting in 2026, which I'm so excited to be going back and getting more training in finance just for you guys, so that I have even more skills to be able to share with you and tools and financial education to share with all of you. I'm so committed to providing the absolute best financial education you're going to be finding anywhere on YouTube. And so to that end, I'm going back to school myself in 26. But in the long run, if you can get most of that knocked out at your 20s, it's just much more efficient. So take it from someone who, I wish I had done my graduate school stuff earlier, but I'm happy to be doing it now as well because I love learning, so it doesn't bother me. The mindset that you want to really focus on in your 20s then is progress, not perfection. So really focus on financial progress, not perfection. You don't have to know everything, it's fine. And your goal isn't necessarily amassing a lot of wealth, it's just building the systems that then will support it as you go forward. Because like I talked about in a recent video, and I'll put it on screen and link to it in the description as well, success flows to systems. And so once you have those financial systems in place, you're going to be in really good shape to then handle more and more money as it comes in. Because as I like to tell people, if you can't handle $1,000, you will never be able to handle $100,000. And so start with that small amount of money in your 20s, really build the systems to support it, build out your budget. I have a whole budgeting playlist I'll put on screen and link to in the description as well. Build all of those skills. And you're doing that right now by watching this video. So good job. And I'm so happy you're here. Second thing, let's look at our 30s. So 30s, the overarching theme is accumulate and automate. So the goal is to make your money work harder than you do. So you're looking at things like increasing your contributions to your retirement accounts. So I think the average age in the US, at least for when people start contributing to retirement, is like 34 or 35. I want to say somewhere in there, mostly because in your 20s, most people aren't making incomes that are high enough to even have any surplus left over to put aside for retirement. And so a lot of people don't start saving for retirement seriously until their 30s. That's fine. If you can start it in your 20s, even better. But 30s for sure, get started on retirement savings. You want to aim for at least 15 to 20% of your income towards your retirement. So that could be 401k contributions. That could be your IRA. If you're a federal employee, your military, it could be your TSP, your thrift savings plan, which is the basically equivalent of a 401k for government and military here in the US. But it's really important to just make sure that you are making enough of a contribution. This was a mistake that I made in my 30s, not contributing enough to my retirement plan. And so I am playing catch up now. So don't be me. Start it in your 30s. Second thing to think about in your 30s is to really start compounding your assets, like start making them really work for you. You're looking at what can you do to really be creating as much wealth through your investments as possible. And I am not an investment advisor. That is not my wheelhouse, but speak with a qualified, licensed investment advisor about how to best get the best rate of return on your money. Then you can also look at starting your own business on the side. You can look at real estate investing. Right now, I feel like real estate investing is not the opportunity that it was 20 years ago because we're seeing just unprecedentedly high cost of real estate pretty much across the country right now. But there's opportunities everywhere. So the key is identify the opportunities for you to build your wealth in your 30s and really max those out. Something else you want to do in your 30s is to upgrade your insurance and your estate plan. This is really good. This is something that I actually was doing well in my 30s. I had worked in insurance, and so I was already coming from an insurance-informed background. And then estate planning is something that we worked with an estate attorney when we were in our 30s, my husband and I did, and we actually set up what's called a living trust, which is just basically like a will plus. So you know what a will is. It just says what you want done with your things, God forbid, should you pass away. But then a living trust is basically like an extension of that, where you can say very specifically like exactly what you want done with all your funds, and everything kind of goes under the umbrella of the trust so that it saves your family and friends a huge amount of trouble and time should, God forbid, you pass away. And so they not only know what you want done, but it's already got the legal framework so that then everything just progresses really smoothly. And in a lot of states, you can avoid probate if you have a living trust. I know mine is one of those. So it just smooths the path for your loved ones should you depart this world sooner than you were expecting. So it's really, really helpful to really go over your insurance, really go over your estate plans, work with professionals in both of those aspects. Make sure that you've got a really good system because, by your 30s, a lot of people have kids, they've got a house, they've got finally some assets to actually like leave to someone versus in your 20s, you pretty much own nothing and it's not a big deal. So just as you start having more responsibilities and more people under your care, it's really important to be responsible. And for heaven's sake, at least at a bare minimum, please make sure you have a will, especially if you have children. The other thing to think about too in your 30s is balancing lifestyle creep. This was something I know we struggled with a lot in our 30s, not so much now because I think we're a lot more financially savvy than we used to be. But in our 30s, it was really hard because that's that time when your colleagues and you are also starting to make more money. And then the temptation is the lifestyle upgrades. And it's well researched in behavioral psychology that we tend to compare upwards. So we tend to compare ourselves against people who are doing better than us. So if our colleagues go out and buy a really nice house, the odds of us going out and buying a really nice house are very high just because we saw them do it. And it's not even necessarily a competitive impulse. It's just human nature. And so you really have to work actively against lifestyle creep. I am all for strategic upgrades. So I am not against having a comfortable life at all. I like my creature comforts just like the next person, but really, really important to pay attention to lifestyle creep in your 30s so that then by the time you're in your 40s, you're not saddled with this monster mortgage on this house that you're so tired of paying for it and you can't remember why you bought it to impress your friends or keep up with your friends in your 30s who you're not even friends with anymore, but you've still got the mortgage. So, debt is very long-lived. Debt will outlive a lot of other things in your life. That's why I'm not a fan of it because it tends to be there for a very long time, even when you're really ready to move on, and it's still there needing monthly payments. So very important, especially with large acquisitions like very expensive homes, very expensive cars, any of the toys, anything about the boats and the RVs and the, other things, you get the drift. Be careful about how much of that you indulge in your 30s because some is good, but then having a lot of debt that you're still servicing in your 40s and 50s is not so good. So the mindset that I want you to think about in your 30s is to shift from earning more to owning more. So you're already thinking about obviously how to max out your salary, max out what you're making with your business, having multiple income streams, but then also starting to really earn more off of your investments as well and own more real assets. So I'm not talking about own 6 cars, a yacht, and a house. I'm talking about owning real assets that will look after you in your old age. We're talking about your retirement accounts. We're talking about your 401k. We're talking about things that will really, life insurance, make an investment in life insurance in your 20s to 30s so that you've got that knocked out. Just invest in those things that will take care of you later on so that you own real assets. And a home might be part of that, but just make sure it's not outsized for what you're going to wish you maybe hadn't overpurchased on in your 40s. The 40s. Let's get into the 40s. The overarching theme of the 40s is optimize and protect. So that's what we're talking about in our 40s. The goal is to fortify your wealth and accelerate growth. So as you've laid in the groundwork in your 20s and 30s, now the 40s, you start to actually really get accelerated growth because you're starting to reap the advantage of perhaps by now 2 decades worth of compound interest. And I'm like, wouldn't it have been nice if I actually did that back in my 20s? I know I had people telling me all about this in my 20s and it just somehow went in one ear and out the other. But you can make up for it later in life. You just have to work harder and do without more things, which is where I am right now. I hope you're not I hope you're not there with me. So goal is to fortify wealth and accelerate growth. First thing you want to think about is maxing out your tax advantaged accounts. So when you can start to do catch-up contributions for that, that's actually tends to be in your 50s where they'll let you contribute more to your tax advantaged accounts, but contribute as much as the annual allowable amounts are in your 40s. You want to start reviewing your investment allocation. You want to rebalance to match your overall goals and your risk tolerance. So in your 40s, if you've already been doing everything right for the last 2 decades, then you'll have a fair amount of wealth you'll have accumulated. So then you want to talk with your investment advisor and say, hey, maybe my goal the last 2 decades was growth, growing my wealth. Now maybe we're focusing more to preserving the wealth, preserving the capital, like focusing more on that. Maybe we take a more conservative investment approach. What do you think? So that's a good discussion to have with your investment advisor in your 40s. You really want as well in your 40s to focus on paying down high interest debt. Now, there's a lot of debate about debt in general. I will leave it up to you and your financial planner to think about what is the right strategy for you. Me personally, I'm attempting to eliminate all debt in my life and really just wipe it all, just wipe the slate clean. Just I'm so tired of having monthly payments. But in particular, if you can get rid of the high interest debt, so keep the credit cards paid off and make sure those aren't gradually, growing when you're not paying attention with unpaid charges on those. If you have car loans, try to get those paid off in your 40s. House loans are tough because if you invested in your home and you have a very low interest rate, it's very hard to make an argument for paying it off too early if you can move that into investments and make more money off of it in your investment portfolio as opposed to paying off your mortgage. So again, really important discussion to have with your financial planner and your investment advisor, because I don't know your specific situation. But I know for me personally, my goal is to not take out any more debt as much as I can possibly help it, and then just really aggressively pay down my mortgage at the moment and really work on getting debt free. And then my goal from my 40s going forward is to just be completely debt free and not take on any more debt, because I had a lot of debt I was carrying in my 20s and 30s. And I just got tired of it. I don't like making loan payments. It's stressful. You have to pay that no matter what, or they'll come and repossess the item or whatever. So these days I really say, if I can't pay cash for it, I am not going to buy it. Give or take certain circumstances. I'm not completely hardline on this, but I know there's some financial advisors out there who say never, never, never debt, but I think it's so much more nuanced than that. So it's really about what's right for you and your situation in your 40s. And then really prioritize your health. This is something that is absolutely critical throughout our lives, but especially in your 40s and going forward. By now, you've been working for a lot of years, you've been investing in your career, maybe putting your health on the back burner. It's really important to make sure that you don't continue to do that going forward, and preferably don't do it in the start, but in some career fields, there's just a huge amount of work involved, and it's hard to balance your health with working in those industries, such as say healthcare or legal profession, or some of these other really high stress fields that I'm grateful for the people who work in them, but it's got to be slightly difficult for them from a health perspective to have spent so many years investing in their careers that way and not necessarily caring for themselves. So really important to look after your health, look after your mental health, start to come up with balanced daily routines, work with your doctor to be able to make sure that all your lab work is up to date. You're not missing any like smoking guns in terms of like cardiovascular risk or anything else along those lines. Just it's a good time to just stop and do a health checkup in your 40s if you have not done one in the last 20 years, which I hope you have. And then also in your 40s, you want to start considering more passive income streams. So that might look like, obviously income off of the investments that you've got. It could also be dividends off of rental properties if you got into real estate investing and you've got rental property dividends. It could be products that you sell. It could be a side job, whatever. But it's really good to always have additional income streams coming in as well anytime in our lives. So the mindset is to really start thinking about money like a portfolio manager. Not every opportunity deserves your time, energy, or your capital. So rather than like maybe trying to be everything to everyone and do everything at the same time and like take every opportunity that comes your way, your 40s are really a time to start being a lot more selective, start to edit out things that aren't working for you with your financial strategy or your life in general, and to really start editing and rebalancing and just kind of take a pause and be like, just stop and take a breath and exhale and be like, okay, I'm just going to pause here at this point in my life, look back and, pat myself on the back for the things I did well in my 20s and 30s, and then get really strategic and start to work with professionals like investment advisors and retirement planners and really hone my strategy going forward, because your strategy gets even more important as we move into the 50s and 60s and beyond. All right, so let's move on to the 50s. The 50s is all about consolidate and cash flow. So the goal in your 50s is to prepare for independence from active income, because this will be the time when you will be looking in your 60s and 70s at not working anymore and not pulling a paycheck once you retire. And so it's very important to start thinking in strategic ways about that. So you want to start assessing your retirement readiness. So this is all really good to talk about with a retirement advisor. Please do not try to DIY your retirement planning. It's very, very important to work with a professional who can help you with all the calculations, because they're fairly complicated. And it's a lot of future casting of how long do you think you're going to live, which is not an answer any of us have. Or how much do you think inflation will go up? How much will the purchasing power of the dollar be in 40 years? Just these questions that we don't have answers to. So very good to work with a retirement professional. So they can also help you with this. But calculate your projected income that you'll need in retirement, your retirement expenses, and your retirement healthcare needs, which healthcare and retirement ends up unfortunately being a massive piece of the puzzle, just because of the way that eventually all of our health eventually deteriorates and we just need more healthcare. You want to, in your 50s as well, start diversifying your income streams. So that's really good to just, because we're preparing for independence from paychecks, start bringing in money from other places. So like we said, that could be investment dividends. It could be even if you have a passion project that you want to turn into a side job. Your 50s are a great time to start that, because you've got the runway of being able to try it out and see if you like doing it. It could turn into your post-retirement job if you're retiring from a corporate position. So it could be a great time to kind of play around with what you want your post-retirement, hobby/job that could also bring in some money on the side to look like. Then in your 50s, you're working on paying off your mortgage if possible. Again, speak with your financial advisor about this, because that may or may not be the right decision for you to make. It's very, very nuanced, so I can't tell you if that's the right decision for you specifically to do, but it's something to at least look into. You want to catch up on those retirement contributions. So in your 50s, you're typically allowed to make more catch-up contributions per year. So you want to do that to your IRA, 401k, things like that. And then 50s are also a good time to start evaluating something called long-term care insurance. So long-term care insurance is something that I've been doing a lot more research on as well, because it basically covers the gap between what your health insurance and retirement and Medicare and Medicaid cover for your long-term care. So if you needed to actually move fully into assisted living, which hopefully you never need to do that. Hopefully I never need to do that, but it happens, and a lot of people just need some additional care at the end of their lives. And so really, really important to plan ahead for that eventuality. So I'll put a link in the description to some resources for you about long-term care insurance, but it's very important to have a plan in place for what you're going to do to cover those expenses, because long-term care insurance is insanely expensive. Here in the US right now, depending on if you want a private or semi-private room and how much like skilled nursing assistance you might need, monthly rates on private assisted living facilities can run anywhere from $6,000 to upwards of $14,000 or $15,000 a month. It is wild. I mean, a huge amount of money at any age, but particularly in your later years. So long-term care insurance helps to offset all of that enormous expense later in life. So good thing to start exploring in your 50s, and then hopefully you never need it, which is best case scenario. So the mindset for your 50s is that you're really entering the preservation phase of protect, simplify, and secure your money. And also, again, being really strategic about those more longer term things, like making sure you shore up your retirement savings, and also making sure that you've got a plan for long-term care, whatever that looks like for you. And then 60s and beyond is really about transition and legacy. So the goal here is to turn wealth into freedom and impact. So you're going to want to create a withdrawal strategy in your 60s for what that will look like when you have to start withdrawing from your 401k or withdrawing from your IRAs. You want to start sequencing withdrawals for tax efficiency, and this is something great to speak with a tax advisor who can really help you with the nuances of how this works. The next thing to think about is optimizing your Social Security timing. Delaying can really boost your lifetime benefits. So it depends on your situation about when you start drawing from Social Security, but again, really good discussion to have with a retirement planner. Then you're looking at revisiting your estate planning. This starts to become a little bit more relevant as we get into our 60s and beyond. So make sure you have a will, make sure that you have a living trust and an estate plan, make sure that your designated beneficiaries and estate executors are all in place. And then really important to focus on purpose and giving. And I know we have a fair number of our viewers here who are in their 60s and beyond. I'd be really interested to hear from you in the comments, kind of what your take is on this. But this was something that came up when I was doing research for the show, is how important it is to focus on your legacy, focus on giving back in those later years, and kind of having a real sense of purpose from being able to take this wealth of experience that you've gotten throughout your life and be able to share that with others. And this isn't even about money at this point, right? This is more like sharing your wisdom, sharing your knowledge. So if you all would feel comfortable, I would love it if you would share with us in the comments kind of what your take is on the best use of your 60s when it comes to financial stuff and mindset, kind of what you're doing that's helping you the most in terms of having purpose and how you're kind of creating that legacy. I would love to hear from you because you're ahead of me in this whole like path of life. And so I would really, really love to hear from you. If you would leave us some comments, I'd be so honored to learn from you and from people who are ahead of us all in this journey as well. We have the benefit here of having viewers on this channel everywhere from like 18 years old all the way up to 65 and up. So it's just a really wonderful platform for us all to connect and kind of share what's working and what doesn't and lessons learned. But that's kind of the overarching principles of what you want to get through from your 20s to your 60s and beyond. And the mindset shift when I think, and I want to circle back around to this, the mindset shift in your 60s seems like the key thing is to really shift from accumulation to enjoyment. So you're out of the years where you're grinding away, making money, and you're able to really enjoy your money, and then also really focus more on purpose and legacy and not have to focus quite so much on like work and making a living and keeping a roof over your head, and kind of get out of that like survival phase and almost get into the thrive phase. I feel like people who are in their 60s and up just really have this wonderful benefit that the rest of us don't have unless we're in that stage of being able to really thrive because they've put in all those years of work. So let me know in the comments. Again, I'd love to hear from all of you as usual. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you again soon in my next video.